All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another illuminating and effervescent episode
Oh,
of the Magic Morning Wood. I've been using my thesaurus.
all right. Sorry, I thought
Yeah.
I've got to be on the wrong show, right? This is not what we do.
Yeah. How's it going, Clive?
I am well, Ron, and tell me, how are you doing?
I am. Yeah, fine. Good. Okay.
Hey,
Well,
hey.
that's the. Okay. See you later. Bye. Or
Yeah,
that's it.
it's
Okay.
always good to check in. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I gotta do a check-in. Right, so, right. So, yeah. So we are moving on along with our algorithm. It's
Mhm.
been a while, so long time no see. And we are reacting to. Help me out. It's been so long. I don't remember where I'm at.
Uh, yes, apologies about this show is a little bit later than usual because I know our screaming fans will screaming even louder than
Yeah.
you.
Yes. Or
But
I was
we
sick, so
are
we had to.
responding to Lucky, the Harry Dean
Lucky,
Stanton
right?
film. Yes,
Of course, Lucky. Yes.
yes. Do you
Lucky.
remember what your
Yes, Mike.
connectivity
I
was?
remember. Yes, I remember.
Okay,
Yeah. So we were doing Lucky, the one with uh, Richard Dean Stanton. Richard Dean Stanton, not
Harry Dean
Robert.
Stanton.
Harry. What's
Yeah.
his first name? Harry Dean Stanton. Who's Robert Richard? I don't know. Harry Dean Stanton. Thank you. And yeah, so I was gonna go with another Harry Dean Stanton movie, but I was looking through the filmography and stuff of that, and then I decided. I remember that you had mentioned that you had never seen Swingers, and I thought, yeah, whatever. Let's bring it out and let's see. I haven't seen it in several years.
When
So I
will I
thought,
learn to keep my big mouth shut?
and I now I had a I was of two minds of this movie with you. I thought you were either gonna it was gonna be no in between for you with this movie. It's gonna be you're either gonna like think that it was really charming and then kind of get along with it, or you're gonna go way the other side, which I thought was probably more likely, which you were just gonna hate this movie, right? So yeah, so I and
Yeah.
my
I
guess
mean,
is that you
you used up some of your Valentine's show ammo early.
well, because I wasn't entirely sure how you were going to get along with it, but I figured it was not going to be like a meh. It was going to be like you're going to have a strong feeling either way, I thought. So
Right.
yeah, my guess was that you're going to fall down onto the I hate it side, which
Yeah,
I think is
kind
probably
of
correct.
between that and May, but we'll get to it because I'm also really interested because I think because I remember Swingers coming out and I do remember a lot of love for it, and there's a lot of nostalgia for it as well now, right? I mean, it's not just you.
Yeah.
This is seems to be a beloved film of its era, and yes, we'll get to it. I certainly didn't get on it, but I'm quite curious because it strikes me as I didn't see it when it was new, so I can't. But surely this has dated. It must have dated. So I'm very curious to see how we, assuming you did like it once upon a time, I'd be very.
Well, so yeah, so I'm yeah. I was watching this movie, and I mean, I've seen this movie so many times. Like I
Oh,
knew,
okay.
yeah. I like I'll go in. I'll get into it when we get into it a little bit more. But like I
Sorry, did we actually say
know.
what it was? It was Swingers, right, from 1996.
Sorry, yeah, Swingers,
Yes,
1996. Yeah, yeah.
yes.
Shall we go through the? I guess I got to go through the deets, right? So it was so starring John Favreau and Vince Vaughn, kind of
Mhm.
the movie that sort of made them famous, and the and what also Heather Graham pops up in it, and Ron Livingston, which is my connection, which was Ron Livingston was the connection through Lucky,
Mhm.
as well as a few other people, and written by John Favreau and directed by Doug Lyman. Doug
Right.
Lyman.
I
Doug
was
Lyman.
most familiar with for I remember quite liking Go when it was new, although I suspect that's another
Go.
film
Yeah.
that hasn't.
Yeah, I remember really liking Go too, and I have a feeling it probably doesn't age well, but
Very much of because it felt very much of its time, even at the time. But it was
right,
like,
yeah,
oh, this
yeah.
is kind of not great, but this is this is speaking to its generation to a certain extent, right? So it's
Right.
but I would be curious to see how that one's aged actually.
Right, yeah. So anyway, yeah, so anyway, that's sort of the details about this movie. 1996, and it's the in a nutshell, it's it's a bunch of guys trying to get along in LA. They're all kind of trying to I guess at least one guy is trying to be an actor, and they're all a couple of them are trying to be actors, and
Yeah.
they're just sort of like kind of swinging bachelors, and they are out in the club scene, hitting the town, trying to find dates and beautiful babies as they call them.
Did anyone actually say that in the day?
I don't know if they said
remember
babies,
that.
but I know this movie did spawn a lot of sort of catchphrases and slang like money. Yeah. So I'll get there in a second. But yeah, and so it's basically it kind of follows John Favreau, who's sort of the main character who's been heartbroken, and he's had his long-term girlfriend kind of has just sort of dumped him just before he came out here to become an actor, and so he's sort of like kind of pining over her and kind of depressing, and his friends are trying to get him out of his funk by kind of getting him out in the dating scene and stuff like that, and yeah, and his friend is played by Vince Vaughn, who plays sort of Vince Vaughn in his Vince Vaughniest, right? Which is the sort of like he's very much the swinging, like the doesn't really care, very kind of ladies man player, always talk the silver tongued devil kind of guy, and yeah, and so it's just sort of like they're dating sort of exploits. And then closer to the end of the movie, he meets Heather Graham at a bar, and they hit it off. And then he sort of, starts a new chapter of his life with Heather Graham as he kind of forgets about his ex-girlfriend. That's how a little more. So, yeah.
That scene as well is kind of and the one thing. It's odd. The one thing that definitely dates it, I suppose, even if nothing else does, is this very specific
swing dance,
swing revival type.
Yeah. It was
like, what the fuck? Why are they all listening to 50s music? And
no swing. Yeah, I remember at the late 90s. I don't know if it was because of this movie, but it was definitely around this time where swing became this like really big popular like retro thing that came back. Like before, I remember I even took like a couple swing dance lessons, and everyone was into swing at the time. Yeah, it was a really big thing where they learned how to swing dance, and it was like I don't know why that came back, but it was just that was the big thing right about this time. Yeah,
it ties in a little bit, and another thing about this film that isn't apparent now, but I think you'd have had to have been there at the time. It also links into the whole Vegas thing and everything. Is they're kind of paying homage to the kind of Rat Pack era, like
yes, yeah,
and all of those, right?
Yeah, and also like there's a little bit of like a lot of homages. There's a lot of like a shout out to like Reservoir Dogs. I think there's one in there as well.
Painful, that is, isn't it? That bit.
That's in there, and then there's a sort of like kind of film noir, that stuff with him, like the silhouette in the doorway. When he opens the doorway, it's like a silhouette. It's sort of film noir-y kind of detective stuff, that kind of stuff. Yeah, so it's a comedy drama. It's just sort of like it's the kind of exploits. Yeah, so I'll just talk quickly about my experience with this movie. So this movie, I kind of chalk it up to something like I mean, it's kind of a poor analogy, I think, but when we talked about Kes for you, where Kes was like it was, you can't be objective about that movie anymore, right? Because it was just sort of like it was so in that sort of formative years for you that it's just sort of like it's like part of you kind of thing, right?
Yes, I mean a slightly different time period. That would be childhood for me. I'm guessing this would have been.
Of course, yeah. So, but yeah, it was a little bit more of a different kind of formative period for me. Whereas, I mean, I can't really be objective about this movie, which is why I was more interested in what you have to say about this movie, because this movie was so unremovable from a part of my life. Like it's like it's so nostalgic, and not even, it's more than nostalgic. Like it's like I relive sections of my life just through this movie. Like this movie was, regardless of whether or not you think it's a good movie, this movie was like a touchstone in my life for my friends and I. It was just sort of like, it just became like just a thing, right? And a lot of us, just became like, we would quote it all the time. It's really quotable. We would always say the lines from it. A lot of other people I know, like there was a friend of a friend. I remember this guy Mark. I remember vividly that it was my group of friends. They had this sort of other friend that I never really met him. It was sort of we weren't really that friends, but we met a couple times. And this guy Mark would he would never remember me. So we met several times, but he would always like introduce himself as if we'd never met, you know. And so that's why I remember this guy. But and he just like ate, slept, and breathed this movie, right? And he used the term money way past the point where it actually was still cool to use that, right? So you like I think he's probably still using it these days, right? You know, so I remember vividly him. But yeah, so we would all like quote it, and I remember like scouring this. I mean, this was sort of like the height of my sort of um sexual frustration, I would say. Like it's like I was like I certainly had no girlfriends, no dating. I had no experience in that field. Definitely still a virgin. It was all that stuff when this was coming out, right? And I remember like my friends and I were all kind of losers, right? We would sit around and watch movies and then not do it. So I remember we watched this movie as if it was like a self-help guide. You know, I remember like watch this movie as if like there was like nuggets of like I was like, oh, 6 days. Okay, you have to wait 6 days to call her.
Oh,
Like,
really? Wow.
we would actually like study this movie as if it was supposed to be teaching us sort of wisdom, which is of course ridiculous now. But like so that's why I can't objectively talk about this movie, right? Because I can't remove it from my life experience now, right? So it's
Right. It
yeah.
also explains why I've always been quite comfortable being a traitor to my own generation.
Yeah, so it's yeah, you know, yeah, it was just such like a milestone in my life, this movie, right? So that I like, and I watched it again, and I still remembered every scene. I haven't seen it in many years, but I still know most of the lines. I can like speak the words along with this movie. Like that's how well I know this movie, right? So
In
yeah,
that
so it's
initial run when you saw it over and over again, assuming on video
yeah,
or
video, yeah, yeah. So
how many times do you think you might have seen it?
I couldn't even count. I don't know, probably like lots of bits and pieces that we would
Right.
watch a scene
And
or
you would
something.
put it
So
on like with friends or at
yeah,
parties?
sure, yeah, my friends and I all like love this movie. We still, I don't really talk to my friends that much these days, but when I do see them, like we always end up like quoting this movie somehow. I think so. It still comes out quite, you know, it's very quotable. There's a lot of like really kind of clever quotes and stuff. Like the script is quite clever a lot of the time. And of course, it's not. You know, I'm sure it's not a great movie, especially probably feels pretty dated. But I can't remove that element from it when I'm watching it
So,
again, right?
so even
Yeah,
seeing it now, as you said, it had been a while since you'd seen it last time. You just went like straight back into that.
Yeah, I was straight back into it. I was like, it's oh okay, you know, and I was saying the lines along with the music. Like I was like, I remembered all the beats, like everything was there. Like there wasn't even a part like it was never even a point where you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about this part. Oh, I forgot about this. Like nothing. I remember every single second of this movie at all times. So yeah, so
Right.
yeah.
I suppose for me, it's a it's a very different film, and it's a couple of years later. But I suppose it comes in this similar period of Rat Pack and noir throwback stuff. But the film for me that I was comfort viewing for a while and I watched many times is Rounders, actually.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that's same time, right? And it has that kind of
Yeah,
Rat Packy kind of like swing feel. I don't know if they use swing music, but yeah, that's around late '90s. That kind of this
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
yeah, you know,
And that's a
in the
film
late
I
'90s.
know
This was
every scene
really
inside out, you know.
what's that, sir?
That's a film I know every scene inside out, and
Right.
I could mouth the dialogue along with.
Yeah. So
That film.
I mean, that's where this movie is. So when I was like, oh, I might as well just you've never seen it before, I might as well just revisit it, you know, and let you see it because I'm really curious what. I mean, I think I know where it's going to go, but I was really curious what you had to say about this movie, right? Because I was like, because I can't objectively talk about this movie anymore. So I thought I was like, I'm really curious what you thought of it, and if it really held up at all, or if you think it was sort of like a, if you didn't like it, do you think it was because it's just dated, or do you think it was just never a good movie, or you know, whatever? So how'd you get on with it?
I think it probably is dated in so much as like some of the I personally don't have a problem with it, and I think it's honest, so it's not a problem. But I would imagine you'd have some of the stuff in this movie in a. I know this was an independent film, but it was through Miramax, so it did get into theaters and stuff. I think you'd be some of the behavior of the main characters would probably be dubbed misogynistic.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Vince Vaughn is misogynistic through
yeah,
this entire
yeah.
movie. Yeah. So
But people, and I think it would have been in '96 as well, but somehow people are less tolerant of showing that behavior on screen in a
well, I don't.
non-mental way nowadays, right?
I don't know. I think because the whole point is that Vince Vaughn is really misogynistic, and Jon Favreau technically is, but doesn't realize he is. But he's also but he's also like he's sort of like the whole part with the waitress, like, for example, like where the waitress comes in, he's like really kind of condescending to her. He's like, oh, I'm gonna count for you, like, get me here's a nickel for you, like he's being really really like rude to her, and then he ends up getting her number later, right? And and John Favreau was like, what the fuck, like he can't believe that just happened. But he is sort of like the audience's like he's like, I can't believe you're such an asshole. Why would you talk to a girl like that? That's what the audience is thinking. And then we are equally as shocked that she like plays along with it, that Jon Favreau is. So I don't think it was misogynistic and didn't realize it. I think it was commenting on it to some degree, right? So
that's my point, is that nowadays I don't think you can even do that without really vilifying that character.
Yeah,
like
sure.
Like in terms of this film, we're allowed to make up our own minds. He's not presented as boo hiss, but I think nowadays in a widely seen film, you would be slightly more spoon fed that someone would stand up and say something at some point. Right? Someone would make a point of,
But I think even then we're supposed to be equally as shocked that women would be into him. I think it's still supposed to be like, why would anyone want to date? Like why would the waitress want to go with this guy, right? Like,
no, absolutely.
So
but we're allowed to make our own minds up. Whereas I think now we wouldn't. So that's dated, but that's not dated in necessarily a negative sense. That's just a sign of something, of the times having changed around it more than anything else. I don't think it's necessarily dated in terms of there's nothing in it so much that I thought, that we have a better way of doing that now or something like that, because I suspect I would have disliked this film in 1996 as well, if you see what I mean. So it hasn't dated in that way, but I can see how a lot of the same demographic who enjoyed this film in '96 would find it distasteful now. Do you know what I mean? I think like that kind of that kind of single 20s kind of group of guys on the make, kind of bromance, bros before hoes kind of thing. I'm not sure if that audience necessarily exists, or they're more fringe now or something like that.
Right.
But and also, because the other thing I was thinking watching this as well that didn't help was it's very proto Entourage.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Before it was Entourage. Yeah, Entourage was probably I never really saw Entourage, but from what I know of it, it was probably very heavily influenced by this movie. So.
Absolutely. I've only seen this is kind of, it's slightly preferable to Entourage because it's a lot more realistic in terms of it's closer to the seedier side of what these struggling actors in life would be like. Entourage is the main character is which apparently is based on Marky Mark, right? And his entourage, he's slightly higher up the success ladder, so there's a lot of vulgar kind of showing off of wealth and sports cars, models, and so there's that's not in this. Those characters would love that to have that.
Yeah, if they were wealthy, they would probably do that, but none of them have any money. Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah,
so that makes it instantly. It's nowhere near as vomit-inducing as Entourage. But again, people love Entourage. Right? I've only ever seen 2 episodes. I couldn't handle anymore. It was Entourage is it's like it makes sense only as like an ISIS recruiting tool or something like that. He almost fucking radicalized me,
Yeah.
So
But yeah, I have to some degree really, I really appreciate movies that are so like like in inextricably like a part of the time it was made. Like you again, this movie doesn't really work now, as you kind of
no,
said, right? It doesn't really, but it definitely wasn't really even an '80s movie. It was so like a late '90s,
yes,
like it's so much like a it's so much like an a demonstration of what late '90s was that it's almost like you feel like you're back there when you're
yeah, no,
watching it,
no,
right? So
exactly.
so I think that has it going for it, right? I
No,
really
no,
like movies like that who are just so like just you can't take it out of the fact of the time it was made, right? So
yes, and I guess your response to it depends how attuned you are to that. So you
right.
said before in here, for instance, when we talked about things like singles and stuff, is for
Mm.
you clicked a little bit more with the
The
90s,
90
whereas
stuff, right? Yeah. So
always felt I always felt uncomfortable in my own skin
oh yeah.
at time.
Right, yeah.
So this film just reminds me of people I didn't like then.
Right.
And
Yeah,
and
right.
the thing is, we've talked about this before, and there's an interesting discussion to be had about, some people seem to think that you always have to have someone to relate to in a film. I disagree. I think you can have a film with entirely unlikable characters and you can
Mhm.
still enjoy, but it has to have something else, right? It has to have
Mm.
or the characters gleefully unlikable or something like that. I think
Mm.
maybe my main problem with this film is because it's very much Jon Favreau's film, right? And
Mm.
he's now big time director, right?
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah, yeah.
um, I think maybe the main problem is I don't have a way in via Jon Favreau because I also find him very unsympathetic. Like at no point does he do anything that I can connect with or I feel sympathetic. I mean, he's not as much of a douche as the Vince Vaughn character, but he's so like I don't know, like I understand that he's cut up and all that, but he's so kind of navel gazing and
Yeah.
just I I and does such stupid fucking things like
Oh
phoning up.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, yeah,
absolutely, yeah. I
getting
mean, yeah.
it.
I mean, I mean the whole answering machine like thing that scene like that's I mean you're meant to think this guy is like an idiot
No,
basically
no, I
what he's doing,
understand
right? So
that.
but he's sort of supposed to be like kind of like a like you're meant to pity him, I guess is
But
what
I
the
think
idea
you
is.
also supposed to have
So
a
he
certain amount
wants
of,
to be pitied, right? So
but you have to have a certain amount of sympathy, right? I mean,
yeah, I
so,
guess.
I mean, was he your in like,
Oh yeah,
or
yeah. I definitely kind of identified with this as the nice guy character, right? That's who I was in the late '90s, the nice guy, right? So that's kind of who I identified with. But of course, the one new perspective I would say, like watching it this time, is that I realized that he's not as much of a nice guy as he seems to
no?
be, or he thinks he is, right? So
Yeah, and that's
I think
interesting. I wonder if that's
I
how
have a
the
little.
culture has changed more than.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's because of I'm watching it from older eyes or if it's the culture has changed. But yeah, it's definitely he is yeah, I definitely see his character a little bit different than I used to because he
Yeah,
was sort of the hero and the the put upon nice guy. And he's really just trying to be a nice guy and kind of find love, whatever. But yeah, he's actually he's actually in some ways more insidious than Vince Vaughn's
yeah,
character because
yeah.
Vince Vaughn doesn't pretend to be anything he isn't, right?
No,
So
it's just he
so
doesn't have the balls to go for it. But
yeah, right, yeah.
you can imagine if he did, he would probably be the worst character. I suppose the one who's closest to being a kind of a character to kind of into the is the Ron Livingston
Ron
character.
Livingston character,
He
right,
doesn't have
right.
much screen time
Yeah,
really, and
yeah.
his kind of character is just he's just more reasonable than these and a little bit boring, and you do wonder
Right.
why he's even hanging out with these people.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I think I mean, it was kind of put that he was sort of like he knew them from before, from like back wherever they came from, and he came out because he'd heard that John Favreau's character was doing well, and he wanted to do well too, right? So, yeah, so he's definitely the most grounded of the characters, I think, right? The more, yeah. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, but yeah, anyway, so it's, um, I, I mean, I still get on with this movie. I still find it amusing and funny. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I was curious what you would think about it. I had a feeling you would hate it, but it doesn't seem like you hate it as much
No,
as I thought
no,
you would. But
that's true because I am very aware of my own relationship with that period of time. So I'm trying to, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't choose to watch. Oh, I didn't until you kind of made me watch it. I
right, yeah,
never would. I had a sixth sense that I wouldn't get on with it,
right,
and I was kind of right. But I mean, it's not as hateful as like Entourage or something like that, for
right,
example. And I
right,
kind
right,
of
right.
knew what I was getting into. I suppose the other thing that the one thing that where I really do feel like the man who fell to earth and I'm like an alien is almost everything else I can kind of, yeah, okay, it's I'm so not into that, but I do remember a time when people were blood. So I am part of the human race after all. Except the one part of this that really alienates me a little bit is I find it genuinely quite difficult. Like it's a comedy drama, it's not a full-on comedy, so it's not necessarily,
Yeah.
but I believe some people have said that there are jokes in this film, and I can't identify them.
Oh,
I
really?
don't
Okay.
know when this film is, now and again, but I'm
I,
assuming the jokes are coming at a higher hit rate than I there's not that much in it that I find full on funny. Do you know what I mean? Or
I,
trying to be funny.
I think this movie is funny, but it's not jokes. There,
No,
it's more
yeah, I was
character
thinking jokes
comedy
as
and like for example, like the a lot of it is kind of like what do they call it now? BOONMEE comedy, but like what's the term
cringe
for it?
comedy.
I forget what it's called. What's that?
Cringe comedy.
Cringe comedy. There it is. Thank you. That's right. That's right.
Right.
There's a lot of it is cringe comedy. Kind of before cringe comedy was fashionable. But yeah, most of it is character based comedy. So that's why it's not really there's no jokes in
No,
it.
no,
Like there's no like
I was using
punchlines.
the wrong term.
But definitely
Yeah.
you have to kind of get along with the characters in order to
Yes,
kind of
I
get
was using
the character
jokes more as a
content.
synonym for
Yeah.
comical content, I suppose. But
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, but what I mean is, I suppose there's a difference for me. There's like cringe comedy, and then there's just cringe.
Yeah. Right.
It's like a fine line, and some things work it really well, like The Office and famous examples like that, right? Where
Yeah.
you're there's a thrill in the skin crawling kind of.
Yes.
But for me, it's just skin crawling. So for me, it's interesting how that passes over into, obviously for some people like yourself, it crosses over into like, well, they're assholes, but I kind of, there's a charm to them, and I kind of relate. And I suppose that's the final step I can't quite take for whatever reason. And I believe that not finding it, because I'm assuming you laughed in this film, right? A few times.
I still laugh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think they do have charm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
so
that might be the difference.
But I don't know if that's because I've thought they had charm and I kind of am stuck there or whatever, but if they do or not. But
so even if I thought they were assholes, I mean, if I laughed more, then I suppose that would have got me over the line, right? But I wasn't laughing either. So I think that might be finally what the main problem, I suppose, that doesn't connect me with it is that it wasn't funny for me.
Right. Okay. Did you what about like the answer machine scene? Like did you think that was, did you cringe it? Like was there anything like oh, like what was, you have any reaction at all?
I suppose while I was thinking, oh yeah, don't do that, but it was, I don't know, it didn't ring true, like it wasn't performed well enough or something. Like I
really
wasn't quite buying it. Like
okay.
Yeah. Although I did appreciate at least that it ends with her saying, just don't phone me again. Like I quite like that they're not afraid to, like, they've the film's still got its edges on it. It hasn't been sanded down, right? I quite like that things do just end badly sometimes, and so I appreciate that it's got a certain amount of teeth. I'll give it that.
Okay, good, fair enough. How about we take a quick break and then we'll pick it up with the other movie, which I'm sure has never been paired with this movie ever in the history of the world.
That's Dan Tootin.
So I
Okay.
do want to say, just in closing, that Clive, you're so money and you don't even know it.
I'm not going to dignify that with an answer. Wow, people went around saying that. I can see that. I still don't think anyone ever said beautiful babies, though.
I don't know. Yeah, babies was a bit of like a, I don't know about that, but yeah, plus yeah, money was definitely all over the place. My friend still says this place is dead anyway, man. Like he still says that all the time.
Is that a quote?
Yeah, that was a quote too. Yeah, no, it's the black guy
No,
friend.
no,
Whenever they
I
yeah
remember him saying it, but it's just
yeah.
it's not. It just seems like something like someone would say very naturally in.
No, yeah, my friend says that all the time. Yeah, this place is dead anyway, man. Yeah.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Anyway, moving on. So, what was your reaction to Lucky?
Yes, I'm leaving the mid-90s now, so I can remove my pith helmet.
Okay.
So I'm no longer in alien territory.
I see. Okay, right.
I can,
Isn't that Explorer like?
yeah, that's what I mean. Because I
Oh, I see.
feel like a explorer in 1996, even though I lived through it. Weirdly enough. Somehow I feel slightly more at home in the jungles of Thailand. I don't know why that is, but
Right. Okay.
so yeah. So my reaction so my connection turned out to be slightly incorrect. So Lucky, of course,
Like
Harry Dean.
slightly.
Well, Harry Dean Stanton is an older man coming to terms with his mortality.
Yeah, I got about halfway through this movie and I was like, "What is the connection between these two?" I do not get. Yeah. So.
Did you think a tortoise would suddenly turn up?
I didn't know what was gonna. I didn't know what you thought was gonna be the connection. So.
And the titular Uncle BOONMEE of this film, Uncle
You said
BOONMEE,
titular.
very good. Uncle BOONMEE, who can recall his past lives, 2010 Thai movie, is also thinking about his mortality and dying, but he's not an old man. He seems a bit more middle-aged, doesn't he? So but you know, that was the link. Was basically someone.
He wasn't really thinking that much about his mortality. He was just sort of sick, and that was the end. He was thinking about other stuff.
Well, anyway, we watched it, and we're going to talk about it. So be quiet. Right. So yes, so this written directed by Apichatpong Weerasethakul.
Oh,
Just have a problem with Thai names there.
A for effort there.
Thank you. They're always really actually some of the names in this aren't as long as some Thai names seem to go on for weeks, don't they? Like fucking hell. I don't know how they remember their own names. So
the opinions of people on this podcast do not represent the opinions of everybody on the podcast.
I don't believe that to be controversial. I think Thai people would agree that relative.
You don't know how they remember their own names? You don't think that's controversial?
Long names. They have long names.
I want to go to Tucker and say, how do you remember your own name?
There's a reason Tony Jaa is Tony Jaa, right, for an international audience, because people wouldn't remember what his real name is.
Right. Okay. Anyway,
yes. So, yes, Uncle BOONMEE is played by Thanpat Saisamyar, is dying of his kidney failure. Basically, he seems to be working like an orchard in
Thailand.
Yes, but in the forests, right? And
okay, yeah.
Helpers, and so apparently this as well comes at the end of a. This was Apichatpong Weerasethakul. I'm not doing that again. Him, the director.
The director.
Yes, he had some sort of multi-part multimedia project apparently.
Okay.
So there was this film and there was another couple of short films and 7-part video installation or something. I've seen none of that stuff and I don't think you need to see it to get on with the film. But apparently there's a bit more in there. So for instance, there's a few lines here, like we don't realize this, but apparently there's something very specific about the location, right? Because it's in the north of Thailand and it's border, and they talk about some of the Laotian workers who work on his orchard, and there's talk about him having killed communists at some point. So there's kind of, there's a lot of ghosts in this film, and including ghosts of historical events, I think, which we kind of have a kind of concept that it's there, but we're not necessarily picking up on it as strongly as maybe a local audience might, right? Like when he mentions certain places, Nabwa, I think is a place. I think something happened there. There was some sort of massacre of communists. That probably means more to a local audience than to us. Right? But anyway, he's there. He's dying on his fruit orchard, and his sister, Ginger Ponias, and her son, his nephew Sadkar Kaibuadi, turn up to, I guess, just help him in his last weeks or days or whatever, right? And they're nostalgic and reminisce about the past and stuff like that. And that's what the film is for a little while. And it's an example of what's become known as slow cinema, right? This long takes, and which I know some people have a really hard time getting on with, right? Like, it's one of those films you have to tune into, right?
Right.
And then all of a sudden, the ghost of his long dead wife, as played by Natakaran Afhaiwonk, turns up at the supper table one night, right? She just kind of appears, first kind of in a kind of traditional see-through ghost way, but she seems to slowly kind of solidify, right, the longer she's there. And I suppose what's interesting is no one in the film reacts in a big way, right? No one's like, holy shit, it's a ghost, or, you know, they're just very much like, oh, you are a ghost, oh, you are here, very interesting, let's talk about, you know. That's my again, not at all offensive Thai accent. I love the Thai accent, I have to say.
All right. Okay.
I'm not making fun of it. It's beautiful.
Okay. Sure.
And then also his son who had been long lost, Girasak Kulhong, he turns up. As
like a monkey spirit or something, right?
Yeah, I'm not entirely. He looks, he's in like almost like a gorilla costume with his shining eyes, and apparently he'd run away and made love with the monkey spirit or something, right? And then
something like that.
Yeah, and then he transformed, and just to prove that this film does have a sense of humor as well, I think it's not just, you know, poor-faced art movie. Like, one of the first things people says to him is, "Why did you let your hair grow so long?"
Right.
And he sits down and he explains all about this, and then we kind of go into a whole. I mean, sometimes we just see them, the sister and Uncle BOONMEE, just doddering around the farm and tasting the fruit, and go to a beehive and enjoying the beautiful. It's a beautifully shot as well. I really like the cinematographer Sayombu Muktiporn, who I think is the director's regular cinematographer. But occasionally we also see glimpses of other things, which we're not really told exactly what they are. Are they past lives, or are they just old stories? Or I'm not quite sure. Like the princess story, the one where she seems to have sex with a catfish. I think I'm reading that correctly, right? That very weird, fascinating scene. I'm not sure who that relates to. I don't know if that's supposed to be a past life or anything, because there's a lot of displacement, right? There's like a scene at the end, for example, where it's not so much past lives, because there's the same people are in the same, they're occupying the same space, but obviously one of them's maybe not supposed to be there, so they've been displaced, or they're ghosts. So I mean, there's more questions than answers, that's for sure. It's not really it's about, I mean, I don't know, I wouldn't presume to say what it's about exactly, but it's a very thoughtful, meditative, a beautiful film that I personally found quite reassuring, like, in a way, like it really hammers and makes it sound didactic, because it's not, it's very fluid and lucid, but it really makes you consider the total insignificance of your existence, but not in a way that freaks you out. It just, I don't know, everything just seems like it passes into this, into that, and it's all part of some huge
Well, it's all Buddhist, isn't it? Right?
yeah, well, yeah, certainly. And yeah, just a kind of tap, and apparently based on a book by a Buddhist abbot, right? Apparently some Buddhist in the early 80s knew some guy who claimed he remembered all his past lives, and he wrote a book about it, and apparently that's the starting point. That's what this film is. I don't know how loosely based on it is or anything like that. Yes, and shot on 16mm. Got, like I said, beautiful looking. It's got this fantastic low rumbling soundtrack throughout the whole thing that kind of suddenly bursts into this Thai pop song at the end. And I don't know, I personally found this film utterly beguiling, and it just sucked me in. And I'd never seen it before, but I remembered it from, because it won the Palme d'Or, right? And I remember coming out. I always wanted to see it, and this seemed like, oh, okay, here's my chance to extremely tenuously link it into. But hey ho! So, yes, I found this. I'll watch this again, I think, and I'll probably watch it again and again. And it's yeah. How about you, Ron? How did you get on with?
You've seen it twice already, you said?
No, I will be watching it again. I plan to. How did you get on with Uncle BOONMEE, who can recall his past lives?
I think it just puts this movie is just in the category of an increasingly a larger number of movies that I'm just completely unqualified to discuss. Yeah, I just feel like, yeah, I mean, I thought it was quite I was quite interested for the first half or so, and definitely it was like when the son showed up as the monkey spirit, I was like, whoa, this movie is not what I expected.
Right.
I kind of sat up and it was kind of interesting, and then of course it got very meditative and very kind of slow, and you have to kind of stick with it and really kind of and I wasn't bad, but I'm sure that it involves a lot of things that I don't know anything about. Like, I'm sure it's a lot of meditations on Buddhism and Thai culture and spirituality and mortality, all these things that I actually have very little to no experience with, and I think that most of it just kind of went over my head, which I think maybe is kind of the point just for some people. But I think it's I'm sure this movie is very, very like visceral for people who like Thai Buddhists, for example. I feel like it's probably like a really, really like amazing piece of work for people who get those ideas or concepts. But for me, because I'm not much schooled in any of these particular areas, it felt I could I was appreciating sort of the magical realism kind of elements of it and stuff like that, and it was definitely different and interesting at times. But yeah, definitely the slow cinema and definitely the disconnect with the content, so it made it a little bit more difficult for me to get through than maybe someone else might. But yeah, it wasn't a total loss for sure. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I hate this movie, but it was hard for me to appreciate it on like a genuine level, I think, because I don't think I got enough of what it was referring to. You know what I mean? So
I mean, it's interesting. It's because we've discussed this before, because it is a little bit of your Achilles heel, isn't it? Is you don't like to be not fully in on what's going on, kind of.
But that wasn't really the case in this case. It wasn't because I didn't get it, so I hated it. But it was just sort of like, it was just talking about things that I don't know anything about, so I don't know how well it's doing it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I don't really know a lot about the Buddhist consciousness or the Buddhist kind of like way of being or their beliefs in all those systems. And maybe it's like for a Buddhist, it might be like the greatest movie ever made, or it might be a Buddhist might think and saying like, what is this shit? You know what I mean? Like, who is this guy thinking trying to do Buddhism on screen? But like, because I don't really know, I didn't know feel like I was qualified to judge it either
Well,
way.
in that
You know what I
case,
mean? So
I would be equally as
yeah, I
unqualified.
guess yeah.
Like I don't know this stuff either, but I I just reacted to it emotionally, I suppose.
Right. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
So, but it seems as if you didn't necessarily react to it like.
No, I mean, I definitely had some emotions to it, but I think yeah, I think not the not knowing what's happening, but definitely the slow cinema pulled me out of it a little bit because it was sort of like, there was a lot of like, oh, that sort of made me sit up and kind of had an emotional reaction. And then it would be like 20 more minutes of the same thing. And then the emotion would kind of start to fade. I'd be like, okay, let's get to the next thing. And I don't really know what's happening that much. So let's go on to it. So it's hard. It was hard to keep the emotional connection considering it was sort of like, it was almost like a eliciting an emotion and then expecting you to keep that emotion through your connection with the content. But because I didn't have the connection with the content, it was hard for me to sustain the emotion that was meant to be sustained for the whole scene. Is that? I'm not sure if I'm explaining it well, but
No, I think I
yeah,
see what you mean.
yeah.
It's interesting though you haven't used the B word. You haven't referred to it as boring.
No, I don't think it was boring. No, I don't. I wouldn't use boring with this one. Uh it was definitely different, right? But I think it's again another movie of like where if I had been more sort of if I had been more ready or um set up for what I was about to watch, I think I would have had a chance to enjoy things more because it was more. I guess I was at times kind of confused, like, wait, what's going on? What kind of movie is this? And then that confusing kind of brought me out of the action, I think, whatever. So, or not, it's not really action, but brought me out of the story, or whatever, as
Right.
it is. Right? So, yeah.
Do you find in general then that you kind of you quite like to know what you're getting into a little
I think, I yes and no. I mean, sometimes I don't want to know, and
mm,
it's best if you don't know. But sometimes, especially with a movie like this, it's almost better if I am set up like, oh, this is the kind of movie this is. Just be prepared, and then I can kind of turn my head to sort of so I'm not sort of waiting for something else to happen. You know what I mean? So but I don't know what I expected with this movie. So I
right.
mean. I mean, I think this is probably the first Thai cinema I've ever seen. Have you ever seen a lot of?
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't think I've ever seen another Thai movie. Have you seen a lot of Thai movies?
I've seen a few, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, is Thai cinema is not.
Well, I wouldn't say this typifies Thai cinema, no.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Um, I yeah, I suppose it is worth. I mean, yes, I agree. In general, it's the ideal way to go into almost anything is without knowing anything really. But
Yes, I think
I
so. I mean,
suppose, yeah, I would. I mean, because I know people have different viewing habits, and I would say this is a film that you need to sit with properly.
yeah, I mean, I think I'm misspeaking by saying that I want to be set up for before I see it. I think it's probably what I mean is that it's probably a second watcher. Like you need to kind of
Yeah.
watch it,
Oh yeah.
and then you need to kind of digest what you're watching, and then you need to watch it again to watch it on another level. I think is probably
Right.
what I'm more referring to. But
I,
yeah, so
how likely are you to watch it again?
it's just time wise, I doubt I'll have time to go to revisit it. But it's a movie definitely that I would be interested to go back and see if I ever, if I dealt with it differently, right? So, or if I,
Hmm.
so if I was able to appreciate more of the elements, I thought I didn't think it was boring. I didn't think it was bad. I thought it was a lot of the stuff was very interesting. It was very, the the directorial choices were really good. I can't imagine any of these people are actual actors, are they?
I think the sister Jennifer Rapanias, she's regular in the director's films, and she's in a few other things. But I don't know; it's a bit difficult to judge because if you
Yeah,
look on the IMDb, I mean, um, Thai films are not necessarily thoroughly represented, so I don't know if the
right.
filmography is on there are entirely accurate.
Complete.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
but also at the same time, I mean, I don't know how many films highlight, and maybe some of these people are also in TV series. But again, some of them I think probably are one and done. I get the feeling some of them are just
Sure.
in this film.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I mean, it definitely wasn't a waste. I'm glad I watched it. But yeah, I think I would need to watch it at least one more time before I could give it like a good critique or have a stronger opinion about it one way or the other. I think so. Yeah, but I'm glad you got on with it. So
yeah. Well, I'm also glad that it wasn't a total like it seems as if it's it piqued your interest at least, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
So that's cool. And
I think
yes,
if it was just him sitting and kind of navel gazing and talking to his wife, I think that would have been really boring. But the fact that like suddenly there's a ghost and suddenly there's this monkey guy who's his son, it was. I definitely had never seen anything like that before, and I definitely don't know how I'm going to react to this for the
it's
next
interesting.
episode.
Well, I suppose magic realism might be the key phrase.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So,
but it is because what I like about it is when it does. I got the feeling that even though this is, you could say very firmly in some ways, it's an art house film, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Things, but I kind of got the feeling from those scenes, like when the monkey spirit or whatever he was turns up, when it does that stuff, I feel as if the director and the people making it, sometimes when kind of artier people, they put something in their films which is a bit more has a bit of a comic book feel to it, or Pulp Fiction. They don't quite know what they're doing. But when he walked in, and I got the feeling that, this isn't just a berry wearing, espresso drinking kind of art house director. Like, this guy, he knows his kind of pulp as well, right? He knows his comic book stuff. And it's funny, it's the only film of his I've ever seen, actually, and I suspect I might choose another one of his for our connections. But I was looking through his filmography, and there's one film, just to back that up a little bit, that jumped out at me. I haven't seen it, so I can't say for sure if this is the case, but a lot of his other films there's another one called Cemetery of Splendor, which looks very interesting, and I might choose his debut actually for the next one. But they occupy a similar kind of they'd be more comfortable in an art house than a multiplex. But then in the middle of his filmography, he's got some film, I think he co-directed it with someone else, called Iron Pussy, which is like a spy parody with like a trans secret agent, and it looks like a very broad comedy. And
wow, okay.
And without having seen it or know anything, I just like the fact that exists, and that this director can
same director
flip between
right.
I got that kind of feeling, like it's a very warm film, I think, is what I feel like. I think sometimes some artier kind of works, they're a bit cold, or they're clinical, or they're short, which I don't have a problem with necessarily, but I appreciated that this felt warm. This felt like a warm bath or a warm embrace. So I'll drag you in, didn't it?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can appreciate that for sure. Yeah.
Okie doke, then. There we go. Like you said, a double bill that no one's ever double billed before, I don't think.
Quite certain. Yeah. Yeah.
And and so next time we'll probably do 2 other totally random things.
Random movies. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
But that's why you all love us and send us all that money, isn't it, Ron?
That's right. So because your money and you don't even know it. So let's get out of here. This place is dead anyway, man.
I'm a monkey god. I can't think of a quote from Uncle BOONMEE.